I remember the sound that little bag of white powder made when it hit the hood of my car like a cheap coin tossed at a rigged machine, and this cop leaned in close with alcohol on his breath and said, real soft, "Out here, I am the law." My hands were spread on the cold metal, my cheek pressed to the windshield, and even with my heart punching in my chest, I had this strange thought. I've read this scene in other people's statements so many times, you know what I mean? I just never thought I'd be the one living it. What Riley didn't know that night on Route 47, empty Highway 1 flickering streetlight, nothing but wind and asphalt, was that the black man he'd decided to turn into his drug bust of the week was the same man who'd been quietly building a federal case on him and his buddies for months. I wasn't some random driver in an old sedan. I was the director of the task force investigating a crew of dirty cops we called the Unpack. It started like a textbook stop if you only looked at the surface. Red and blue lights exploding in my rear view, a quick blip of the siren, his cruiser climbing up my bumper until I had no choice but to pull over. I killed the engine, put my hands on the wheel, kept my movement slow. Riley walked up with that lazy swagger like he'd already decided how the night would end. He tapped the glass with his flashlight and said license registration and don't get smart before I'd even opened my mouth. When I asked calmly, "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" he gave me that look people reserve for something stuck to their shoe. "Old car, black driver. 1 a.m. on this road," he said. "That's all the reason I need." His partner Briggs hovered behind him, lifting a little body cam, smirking like this was entertainment. "Easy quota tonight," he muttered. They yanked my door open, dragged me out, shoved me over the hood, and patted me down like they were sure I had a weapon taped to every bone. They found nothing. Riley's jaw tightened. Men like him hate empty hands. He stalked back to his cruiser, and I didn't need to see it to know he wasn't grabbing paperwork. He came back with a plastic bag of powder pinched between two fingers, held it up for the camera like a trophy, then tossed it onto my back seat. "Well, well," he said too loudly. "Look what we found." My chest burned, but I still let out a short laugh and told him, "Your hand's shaking, man. Terrible acting." That cut deeper than any protest. He slammed my head down harder and hissed in my ear, "Out here, you're whatever we say you are." The thing is, I'd chosen that week on Route 47 for a reason. The Iron Pack wasn't just whispers anymore. It was a pattern I could trace: 12 dead civilians, all black, all officially resisting, all miraculously connected to drugs or guns they'd never seen before. Their names were in a folder on my passenger seat. I'd been trying to expose these men. I just didn't expect to become their evidence. The twist rolled up quiet. Headlights from a black SUV cut across the shoulder. No siren, no markings, just money and confidence. Riley straightened like a kid whose father just pulled into the driveway. The door opened and Deputy Chief Lang stepped out in a dark coat and polished shoes that had never touched a real sidewalk in years. He didn't ask what happened, didn't look at the bag on my seat. He glanced at my face once like he was checking a box, then told Riley, "This type. Handle it fast," and turned away. That one sentence felt colder than the cuffs. They didn't take me to the station. They drove me to a warehouse crouched by the highway, steel walls, rusted lights buzzing tired overhead. Inside, the air was thick with oil and damp concrete and something older that clung to the back of your throat. You could tell this place had heard a lot of screaming that never made it to paper. Riley shoved me into the center of the floor and cracked his knuckles. "Stand still," he said, grinning. "I like the sound of bones breaking." Briggs stayed off to the side camera, up red light, blinking face flat like he'd spent years practicing how not to react. They started hitting me. Fist to the ribs, boot to the leg, head bouncing off a concrete pillar, the same rhythm I'd seen in autopsy photos. "Where'd you get the drugs? Who are you working for? Say it for the camera." Every time I tasted blood, I thought about my brother's file: resisted arrest, non-compliant, no body cam footage available. I wasn't giving these men a neat little narrative. At some point, Lang came inside, hands still in his coat pockets like he was inspecting a shipment. His eyes moved over my bruises without slowing down. "Add more product, make it clean," he told Riley, as if my entire life was just a messy paragraph he wanted rewritten. I lifted my head, looked straight into Briggs's lens, and said as clearly as I could through the blood, "Keep recording. A judge is going to watch this." For just a heartbeat, something flickered in his eyes like he remembered what the badge was supposed to mean. Before anyone could stage their perfect story, the world shook. First a low vibration, then dust raining from the rafters, and then the hard chop of rotor blades as a white searchlight sliced through the high windows, washing the room in harsh light. My team had finally decided the line had been crossed. Riley cursed. Briggs flinched. Lang's jaw clenched. In that split second of chaos, I slipped a punch, drove my shoulder into Riley's chest, and ran for a side door that opened into the industrial yard out back. Picture cargo containers stacked like tombstones, broken concrete, old cranes rusting into the dirt. Riley came after me with his gun out, firing wild shots that sparked off steel, shouting my name like a threat. I led him over a rusted metal sheet I knew covered an old service pit. The metal groaned and dropped. I went with it, hit the bottom hard enough to see stars, but when I got my phone light up, I forgot about the pain. Crates, pallets, shrink-wrapped bundles stacked to the ceiling, cartel logos stamped on the sides, serial numbers burned into wood. Not a side hustle. A full distribution hub sitting under a police-run yard. "The whole damn city's in here," I whispered, filming everything, every label, every logo. Riley and Briggs climbed down after me. When Briggs's flashlight swept over the stacks, he went pale. All those years of just filming finally had a body. Panic makes people stupid. Riley started firing. One bullet hit a chemical drum and the bunker turned into a furnace. Fire raced along the walls, barrels groaning, smoke clawing at our throats. I grabbed Briggs and dragged him into a side tunnel while the room behind us exploded in heat and light. Down there in a narrow corridor lit orange by flames, Briggs finally broke. He grabbed my sleeve, eyes wild, and stammered that Lang would kill him, that no one who sees this lives, that he was just the cameraman. I told him the only honest thing left. Wrong orders kill you first. Help me, and maybe you walk out. Stay loyal, and you die right here. You could see the war going on behind his eyes. Then he did something I didn't expect. He pulled a keycard from inside his jacket, voice shaking as he said, "I keep backups. Every cleanup. Locker 12B, code 904. That was the first time he stepped off their side of the line. We clawed our way out through a maintenance hatch, half choked and half burned, and made it to the skeleton of an unfinished construction site nearby. Naked rebar, half-poured slabs, pillars reaching for nothing. Unmarked cruisers and armored trucks had already surrounded the area. Lang's men and Riley's crew weren't exactly united anymore. Lang had called Riley just a dog over the radio, said, "I don't need a dog that thinks," and that sentence snapped something in the man. He turned his gun on the boss he'd worshipped for years. Lang's squad answered. Somewhere in the echo of gunfire and shouting, one bullet found Briggs's side while I was dragging him across broken concrete. He gasped, went slack for a second, blood soaking my hands as I pulled him behind a slab of fallen wall. I was still trying to figure out how to move him when a new sound cut through everything. A thin mechanical whine I recognized from overseas. A drone. Its light swept the site, paused, then locked onto our corner. Target detected, a calm synthetic voice said. Lang, standing by an armored truck like this was a training exercise, lifted a controller and said into his mic, "Blow him up. No arrest, no trial, just a race." Instinct took over. I shoved Briggs toward a deeper pit between two slabs, snapped, "Jump, if you want to live," and dragged both of us over the edge as the missile came in. The world above us ripped open. Light heat, concrete, and steel all slammed together in one long roar. The shockwave tried to haul us out of the hole, but the walls held. When the ringing in my ears finally faded, I heard engines starting, doors slamming, and Lang saying, "Two bodies. We're done." Nobody climbed down to check. His word had been treated as truth for so long, nobody remembered how to verify. When the last vehicle pulled away, I hauled myself up and dragged Briggs with me. He was gray around the mouth, breathing in short, shallow bursts, whispering, "I don't want to die." "Then don't," I told him, pressing my hand over his wound. "You already gave me the key. That counts." He nodded, eyes glassy but focused, like a man who'd finally decided what side he wished he'd been on from the start. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Riley crawled out of that wreck too, half his face burned, uniform torn, and blackened eyes full of nothing but hatred. He staggered toward us with a knife he'd kept taped under his boot. "You ruined my life," he rasped. I stepped between him and Briggs, every rib screaming, and said, "I just showed you what it was." He hit me like a wild animal, hands around my throat, squeezing until my vision narrowed to a thin white tunnel. Somewhere through the choking, I heard Briggs wheeze, "You have to live, Marcus. Someone has to tell the truth," and that one line cut through the panic sharper than the blade. I broke Riley's grip, hit him hard enough to send him stumbling, but he wasn't done. He lunged again with the knife. There was no way to move without leaving Briggs exposed. So Briggs made the choice himself. He stepped into the blade. It went into his chest deep. For a second, everything went quiet. Flames flickered slow. Dust hung in the air. Riley stared. I stared. Briggs looked down at the handle, then up at me with this small, tired smile and whispered, "Locker 12B, 904. Don't let me die for nothing." I caught him as his knees buckled, promised I wouldn't, then turned and ended it with Riley, quick and clean. No speech, no mercy. When I went back, Briggs's skin was already losing its warmth. His last word was, thanks, like he was grateful he'd finally gotten one honest choice, even if it came at the end. I laid him on the concrete and walked across the ruined site to where Lang lay bleeding. His fancy coat was shredded, his phone still in his hand, an internal panic alert blinking red on the cracked screen. He coughed, spat blood, and still tried to smile. "You don't understand half the story," he croaked. "Then who's really in charge?" I asked. He laughed short and ugly and breathed one name, Spectre. Even dying, you could see real fear flicker in his eyes when he said it. Not fear of me. Fear of whoever owned that name. Lang died with that word on his lips. A moment later, Briggs's phone buzzed in my pocket. No caller ID. Just a red symbol and one line of text. "Spectre knows you're coming." I stood there in that broken concrete skeleton, smoke curling up past half-built pillars, bodies cooling on the ground, distant sirens growing louder because of Lang's alert, and for the first time that night I felt something new. The fear wasn't just on our side anymore. So that's what really happened on Route 47. A dirty cop planted drugs on the wrong black man. His boss tried to erase the mistake with fists, bullets, and a drone, and a cameraman who spent years just filming decided in his last minutes that the truth was finally worth dying for. People like to say it's just a few bad apples, that the system works if you give it time. I'm telling you, as the man who had that bag tossed into his back seat, it's not a glitch, it's a design, and it only works when everyone else looks away. So let me ask you this, if you'd driven past that stop and seen me bent over my hood while Riley found his miracle evidence, would you have kept going, or would you have pulled over, pulled out your phone, and made it your business for 5 minutes? Do you think someone like Briggs deserves any forgiveness for what he did at the end? Or was it too little too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue with me about justice, power, and redemption. And if you've got your own story about somebody abusing a badge or a title, share it, because silence is exactly what people like the Iron Pack, and whoever sits behind the name Spectre, are counting on. Hit like so this story doesn't disappear under something forgettable. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when we follow that name into the light. And next time you hear someone in uniform say, "Out here I am the law," remember my voice and think twice about whose truth you're about to accept.